Hey, welcome to another one of my videos, and today we're going to be doing a review of Brandy's book, Phases, a memoir. Y'all, this book, it was beautifully written, that's number one, and I'm going to read a couple of the passages in the book that I thought were written so beautifully. I love the historical references, especially at the beginning of the book. It reminds me of Tina Knowles' book, the way they go into not just where she was raised, but also some of the historical significant things that happened during her lifetime and during her parents' and grandparents' lifetime. I also like that she was so vulnerable and so honest. There were several points in the book where I just kind of felt like, oh my gosh, she was just a kid. She was just a kid. I like the book, but I feel like at some point, Brandy stopped seeing herself as the Brandy that we all know and love. So I love the way the book ends because it goes back to her just enjoying being an artist, not necessarily for sales, record sales, or trying to achieve like the success of things that she's done in the past, but just doing art for art's sake is what I'm trying to say. And so I loved how the book ended in that way, but let's get into it. Brandy is from Mississippi, and she moved to California later on in life, but she started out in Mississippi. And the way the story opens up with her talking about, going to church and singing in the church and her parents being very involved in the church. I think her dad was a preacher or a minister. He was over the music ministry, and he really saw her gift and cultivated it and helped her with it, encouraged her with it. And so he was like one of the first people that like helped her when he saw her like listening to these songs and trying to mimic the things that she heard on the radio and idealizing Whitney Houston. Like she just loved, I mean, everybody loves Whitney Houston, but Brandy, and like I feel like a lot of artists that came up around her, like Monica and so many different people, they just idolized Whitney Houston because Whitney Houston was the voice, but she was also a complete knockout beauty. Like she was beautiful. Like it's crazy. Like she could sing and she was beautiful. It was just, Whitney was what the kids say. So it talks a lot about her studying Whitney Houston and singing The Greatest Love of All on auditions when she finally got to the point of auditioning. But in Mississippi, it talks about some of the racial climate that took place and led to a lot of the things that for Black people in her community, the way that it ended up being when she grew up. And so I won't go too much in detail about that, but if you pick up the book, you'll read it. I think you might appreciate that, reading about. So when her parents noticed that she had this talent and everything, they moved to California. So Brandy was bullied a lot in school because of her eyes, because of, and which I just don't even understand, because I think Brandy is gorgeous. So I don't understand the thing with her eyes, but apparently she got teased about that a lot in school. And not just that, but also like her shape, because she was kind of thin and didn't have like a lot of chest and all these different kind of things going on, which is really weird because when she got into the music industry and got older and started to develop, then it was the thing of her not being thin enough and people literally telling her to her face that she wasn't pretty enough. When she went to high school and was going to this like high school for kids who had these talents like her, singing and dancing and acting, and she would want to go out on certain auditions that she would see posted on the bulletin board. And when she asked her guidance counselor, the counselor literally said to her, like, you're not like a knockout beauty. Meanwhile, she ended up being a cover girl and, was the first Disney princess, Black princess, but she wasn't a knockout beauty. Okay. This is why we can't listen to people and we have to listen to the Holy Spirit and our inner voice, because what? But she was a child, and you get to a point where you learn as an adult not to listen to that stuff. She wasn't there yet when her high school counselor decided to say these things to her. Nevertheless, she was bullied a lot in school by all the way through, even like elementary school. She tells stories about being bullied in school, but from a spiritual level, and I look at everything from a spiritual level, of course the enemy would try to have her have such a rough go of it that she would give up on herself and on her life. Because look at the millions upon millions of people that she influenced, not just here in America, but all across the world, by being the first Black girl to do all these things. And so because of her, so many other Black girls felt like they can achieve certain things. Like, I listened to her song with Tiwa Savage and different artists like Burna Boy, who are like redoing and sampling her songs from back in the day. And it's like none of that stuff would even be happening, though some of those artists might not even exist if it wasn't for the work that she did. So why wouldn't the enemy be trying to keep her from doing stuff, from a child, from a little second grader, like getting her to be bullied and trying to silence her voice and keeping her not able to talk and afraid to? No wonder, because she was going to do amazing things that impacted millions of people beyond making money, but just planting the seed of inspiration in Black people. And then not even just Black people, people all over the world. Of course the enemy would come against that. But anyway, I digress. I want to read some of the things that stood out to me in the book. So bear with me, and I hope you enjoy this. I'm not going to read too much because I don't want to get a copyright, but I do want to read certain things that stood out to me. So her counselor said to her, they want a Vanessa Williams beauty, and you're not that. Is that the fact that an adult would ever say something like that to a child boggles my mind. She talks about getting her deal with Atlantic Records and how she was in a girl group before she got that deal. She had always wanted to be a solo artist, but the guy who was working with them, and I'm blanking on his name, he decided to put her and two other women, these two young girls, they were not women, they were young girls, under the age of 16 at this time, in a group together to try to develop them as a whole, I guess, and to kind of catapult them all into their separate things. And the other two girls were sisters. So, of course, when they broke up, it was a big thing. But because when they went for their audition at Atlantic, the guy was only interested in Brandy. And so the other two girls, and the group ended up breaking up and going its own separate way. But of course, you know, that was something that she didn't want to do, that she did to try to make her way into becoming the independent artist that she did and eventually become, because that catapulted her into the audition space so that she can get singled out and become the independent artist that we know. She talks about working on the Thea TV show. That was very heartbreaking to read. She had some not so great encounters with the star of the show. And so she ended up, it left a really bad taste in her mouth about TV. And she really didn't want to do the Moesha thing at first when it came up. And I think, and to me, from what I read, it seemed like it had something to do with that past experience. But again, of course, the enemy would try to place a bad taste in her mouth about TV early on, because he already knew what she was going to do in Moesha and the impact that show was going to have later on. So why wouldn't he try to, you know, give her a small taste of acting and make it so unpleasant for her and so unfortunate for her, so that she would not take that opportunity to do Moesha? But what the Bible say, what the devil meant for harm, God will use for good. Listen, we all know what Moesha did. There's no reason for me to even talk about it. It ate, and it continues to eat. There are people, new generations, that are discovering Moesha and falling in love with it, even now in 2026. I loved when she talked about working with Robin Thicke early on before he became Robin Thicke, and some of the work that they did together. I really love reading that. Working with Keith Crouch and Andre Crouch. I love reading about that because we all know that they're like musical legends. She talks about her relationship with Wanye from Boyz II Men. That was a really, really, really hard thing for me to read. I'm going to read you what she wrote because I don't want to have too much of an opinion on this. I feel like, especially during that time, and I'm sure it probably still happens now, unfortunately, the innocence of young girls is preyed upon by people who know that they don't know certain things. And of course, the young girls want to feel like big grown women, so they go into these spaces and do certain things because they want to be mature and everything like that. But then bad things happen. Brandy was very much sheltered and protected by her parents. They kept a very keen and watchful eye over her, but it doesn't keep kids from wanting to indulge in the things that they want to indulge in. And so I'm going to read to you what she said. Brandy says here, it seems to me that he weaponized my admiration. She's talking about Wanye. Shaped my friendship into dependence, my respect into desire. I felt swept up in a current I couldn't control. He said, my girlfriend is 16. I don't remember when he first said it, but those 4 words started rolling off his tongue whenever we were alone. Mine unfolded under the influence of a man who seemed to know exactly how to make me question my own beliefs and boundaries. And I hung in this strange balance. I was navigating that time in full view of the world, every move scrutinized, every choice dissected by people who didn't know my heart. She said she felt like saying no meant losing him. She says, my first time lacked the specialness I had painted in my mind because it wasn't about me at all. Looking back in my mind, it was about him getting what he wanted from someone too young to recognize she was being used. There was no magic, no romantic tenderness enveloping us. All the passion he expressed through song felt absent because it wasn't lovemaking. I had wanted that milestone to be sacred. I had wanted to feel cherished in his eyes and in his touch. I was too naive to realize that deep down inside, he did not see me as special. I think he saw me as conquerable, as someone whose boundaries could be negotiated away. Now I see it as the beginning of a calculated courtship of a teenage girl by a grown man who knew exactly the effect his attention would have. His refusal to acknowledge what I believe he did, to take responsibility for the power I believe he wielded and abused, feels like its own form of continued abuse. This framing erases his culpability entirely. It centers my naivety instead of his manipulation. It asks why I didn't know better instead of why he didn't do better. It takes the responsibility off of the men and places it squarely on the shoulders of girls who were never equipped to carry such weight. Then she says, being taken advantage of as an immature teenager and then having it thrown in your face for the next 30 years is a kind of cruelty only reserved for women. I really wanted to also talk about Kim Fields, because she says Kim Fields helps her prepare to do a really good I guess rehearsal for Moesha, because she was selected to do it. But when the camera started rolling, she needed a little bit of like tweaking and help. And she shouts out Kim Fields for working with her, like taking time out of her schedule, spending time with her and helping her to run her lines and get into character. And I just wanted to talk about that because it represents, everybody knows Kim Fields and her mom and her sister have been in the industry for so long. And it's so good to see how they kind of pass the baton and help usher the next generation into the acting space and take care of each other. Also, I was watching an interview, listened to a podcast, the Family Matters podcast, and Eddie from Family Matters was talking about how Kim Fields did the same thing for him. She also talks a lot about being a kid and wanting to do kid things, but having this intense, crazy schedule where she basically would like not even get a day to do anything that she wanted to do. It was just like from the time her day started until the time her day ended, day after day after day, she was working and doing some kind of like work. I wanted to also talk about her braids and what a big deal her braids were. So she writes this about her braids. She says, but I now understand that braids connect us across time and space, linking past to present to future. They are an homage to those who came before and a promise to those who will follow. I love that. I was also fascinated to learn that it was Brandy's idea to have her and Monica do the Boy Is Mine song. The song had been finished. Monica was not on it. It was the done song. And she thought it was her idea to have Monica get on the song too. And so she had been wanting to reach out to her, but the label said that they would reach out. Long story short, Monica was like, if she wants me to do the song, she needs to hit me up. So Brandy called her. They talked. They went and hung out at like a theme park. She went to Atlanta to hang out at a theme park with Monica. They had time together. Close bond. Always got along. Her and Aaliyah got along too. And basically, the whole fake beef between Monica and Brandy was drummed up by their label. After Monica came and recorded the song with Brandy and her team in her studio, her label decided that they wanted to re-record Monica's part at their label. So they had to scratch the recording that they did together with Brandy's team, and Monica's team did her part over, and then they had to put the song back together again. Just mess. The label was messy. And then they're gonna name Monica's album "Boy Is Mine" when the song is getting ready to come out. It was just a whole bunch of it. So a lot of the beef that was going on with Brandy and Monica, of course, number one, wasn't really real. And even when they did get to the point where it was kind of tense, it was never like behind anything that they did to each other. It was mostly like the labels doing things to kind of like make them upset with each other, if that makes sense. But I love the fact that it was Brandy's idea for them to do that song together, and people told her no. Her people in her team told her it was not a good idea. It was going to add fuel to fire. Blah 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 blah. But it was their only Grammy winning song. It's both of their only Grammy winnings. So that's a huge deal. Like, they have their Grammy with each other. And so now we can see why they going on tour together now and doing all these things together, because it was never any real beef. It was teenage girls, teams, trying to make them be catty towards each other. This is what she writes about her cover girl situation. She says, landing a cover girl campaign, my face on billboards and in magazines, selling beauty to a world that had only recently begun to acknowledge the fact that Black was in fact beautiful. Like, it's a big deal. I mean, Queen Latifah at the time had just started doing some cover girl work. So a lot of this stuff was just starting to get to the point where it is now, where you see like Tiana Taylor and all these different people doing beauty. That this is the beginning of it, the surge, right? She also talks about Whitney giving her so much encouragement from the time that they finally did meet. She had tried to meet Whitney Houston so many times. There's even a point in the book when she was younger where she went to see CeCe Winans and BB Winans at a show, some kind of taping or something, and ran down to the front against her mother's will and asked CeCe Winans, because she introduced her to Whitney, and CeCe loved her enthusiasm so much that she called Whitney on her phone, on her cell phone, and said, there's somebody that wants to talk to you. And Whitney came on the phone, and she could barely even speak, but she spoke to Whitney. Then there was another time where there was a guy that was trying to get her to meet Whitney, and she went to the concert, and Whitney went into labor, y'all, and she couldn't meet Whitney. So it was so many chance meetings. But after she finally met Whitney, Whitney would give her so much advice about like her career and things like that. And this is one bit of advice that Whitney gave her. She says, Whitney once said to me, her voice like velvet over gravel, never let anyone else tell you who you are. And she said her eyes had so much intensity in them when she said that to her. And now, of course, once we learn about some of the things that happened to her, once she started to like come of age, whether it was in relationships with people who like verbally abused her, or in the industry when they were treating her bad because some of her albums weren't selling the way that they used to, and her coming now full circle and just doing art for art's sake and enjoying what she does and not necessarily focusing as much on the numbers and things like that, it goes back to what Whitney told her all those years ago. She writes, there was always someone there lifting me higher than I thought I could reach. Identity is a big, big part of this book, because she was so young when she came into the industry and playing that role, Moesha, for so long, and during some of her like more formative years. She talks about having that, not knowing who was Brandy and who was Moesha, how much of it was really her, how much of it was the character, and just really trying to find the distinction about who she was when she wasn't forcing smiles for interviews or photo shoots, or who was she really at her core, because she was working so much. There wasn't a lot of time for her to sit, be with herself, and figure out who she was. So when she finally got to the point where she had her nervous breakdown, and she talks about that, she says, a nervous breakdown, that's what they call it when your mind can no longer carry the weight and stress of your life. Smile, pretend, and stress, your smile pretends doesn't exist. So after she had her nervous breakdown, she and her mother had some contention because her mother was her manager, and so at times she would want her mother to just be a mom and say no to certain things on her behalf, or and try to and just be there for her so that she could feel comforted when she needed comfort. Sometimes her mother would say to her, "Hey, we signed this contract, you got to do this work," which makes sense as a manager, but sometimes she would just want her mom. And so after she had this nervous breakdown, her mom stepped down as her manager, and they started to regain their mother-daughter bond again. And she was able to get some time. She was able to get some time to be alone with her thoughts. She started looking at spirituality beyond her Christian upbringing and different other people's different practices and beliefs, and testing out what felt right to her and what didn't. And so the downtime, the nervous breakdown in a way was a good thing, because it led to her being able to have the time that she needed to kind of figure out who she was. And after that time, she came back and started getting in the album, making a new album. And of course, she got pregnant with her daughter. And so she talks about her pregnancy and that whole journey to becoming a mom, and then after that being a mom. And basically after having her daughter, she talks about, oh my gosh, she talks about when her daughter discovered that she was this big singer, and she was like, "Mommy, are you famous?" And I thought that was so funny, because she had sheltered her daughter. Her daughter didn't know that she had been like this artist. And so she talks about recording her album and Michael Jackson being in the studio next door, and how she met him and passed out. And Ray J says, "Get up right now, Ray J. This is Michael Jackson and you're on the floor. Get up." And so I thought that was funny. Yeah, she really enjoyed meeting Michael Jackson, to say the least. She had been wanting to, knowing that he was recording next to her for all that time, and finally she got her opportunity, and it literally floored her. She also talks about the car accident that she was in, and you know, someone did lose their life in that car accident. May they rest well, and may God continue to be with their family and friends. But she talks about how, because she was, of course, a celebrity, they made it out to be like her fault, and she was like the fourth car back in the accident, and how even her management team and different people would want her to speak out and plead her self-defense in the situation. Basically, I guess, saying that, the accident in and of itself wasn't her fault, and she just couldn't bring herself to do it, because she felt like because she survived the crash, she did not have the right to really defend herself, because somebody had lost a family member or a friend. And I totally got that. Like, it's like, how do you speak out against something but somebody's no longer here? Nothing that I say, it even feels fair to even defend myself, because I still have my life, type of thing. But she talks about that in the book, and how that also like sent her into like almost like a spiral. She didn't want to come out the house. Of course, people were like upset with her, and she was really depressed about, first of all, the person passing away, and then also people ridiculing her, but more so the fact that there was someone gone and she was still here, and she had like a survivor's guilt thing going on with that. And so that also like I don't want to say handicap, but that also kept her away from doing like music and things like that for a while, because it was very painful. She writes, "When your existence is defined by how the world sees you, your own thoughts, your very sense of self become clouded by the opinions of strangers, and I began to believe I was the awful, reckless monster the internet and thus the world believed me to be." I was surprised to read that, because I didn't realize that that's the way the world had at some point began to view her or see her. Or maybe that's the way she thought the world viewed and saw her. But I pray that she realizes now that that's not the case. But my favorite part of the book is the part of the book where she starts doing Chicago, and she's doing Roxy in New York, and she talks about arriving in New York and showing up for the role, and it being so difficult because the amount of shows they do per week, per day, the amount of vocal training and things that she had to go through. but it reminded her of herself and it showed her her strength again. So this is what she wrote about it. She says, watching my body transform, muscles lengthening and strengthening, voice gaining more power and endurance gave me something beyond mere confidence. It restored my faith in my own resilience. I love that so much because she starts to come back into herself. Um, and then her daughter even calls her on the phone and she was like, you sound different, like happier. And she was starting to believe in her own strength and ability to do certain things again from doing that role and how hard it was. She would be jogging and trying to keep up her endurance because the amount of shows they had to do, but also, and then reserving her voice and not talking so that she would be able to sing and really belt out those notes and things for the show. It was just, I love this part of the book the best because it's like her coming back into herself again. Her like almost turning back into that young girl when she was a little girl who wanted to sing and had so much passion and fire for it and was like, you know, pushing herself as hard as she could to get to this place that she wanted to get to. And this is her doing that again after, you know, being becoming an adult, and now your child is older and she's, you know, rediscovering her voice. And I absolutely love this part of the book. That is my favorite. This is what she wrote. She says, I realized I had finally found my way back to myself, back to my voice, back to my purpose. So on the last page of the book, she writes this, and I think it's the perfect way to like wrap up this video. She says, I've learned that the stories I once thought defined me, a meteoric success, a public failure, a private devastation, were simply chapters. They were important chapters, yes, but not the entire book, not the complete story of who I am. I am all of these women and none of them. I am the through line that connects them, the consciousness that experienced them, the soul that survived them. So I I really enjoyed the book. And as you can see, it's written so beautifully. And I'm really proud of her for writing this book and sharing her story, because I know some of that stuff was probably not easy to talk about and share with the public. But at least it's her own story in her own words, kind of like Aretha did with her book. I need to review that book too. But kind of like some of the people before her, artists before her, it's good to have their story in their own words and not based on what other people put out there. And cheers to Brandy. And I pray that she would continue to work and do what God put her here and purpose her to do, because we need her. I saw recently that she did the Different World theme song. So excited for that. As soon as I saw her face singing that, I felt so happy, because I'm like, it's Brandy, you know? She's a part of our childhood for a lot of us, and we grew up watching her and just seeing ourselves in her. So cheers to Brandy. Continued happiness, continued purpose and fulfillment for her in the future. I hope you guys take a chance to check out the book. It was good. And yeah, see you in the next video. Bye bye.